Moi. The love and respect that I have for your comments, emails, messages, links brought me to the creation of an interesting debate. Let's talk a bit more about staged series. On the screen at this moment, you can appreciate an 1838 photograph of the amazing city of Paris. It is actually the first photo ever taken of a city. Many of the viewers point out that in those times the camera could delay various minutes before capturing the image. Therefore, humans, horses, trolley, boats couldn't be photographed due to their movements. First of all, the images that we have presented in the first part of this video were mostly belonging to the 1860s, 50s or 70s, and very few earlier than 1850s. Therefore, the technology of the cameras was already much superior than in 1838. Just look at the quality of these 1860s photographs of St. Petersburg and compare them with the end of 1830s and beginning of 1840s. Therefore, there was no longer such extended amount of time for the camera to capture the image. But that's absolutely not the main point. We will come back to the vanishing people in a moment. The main points are many. The channel of a friend called Ziggy Dan points out, as many others did, the lack of smoke from the house's chimneys. On the screen you can observe an 1850s picture of Reykjavik, capital of the spectacular Iceland. As we can see, the smoke could be captured by the camera. There is no reason to believe that due to this delay in capturing the image, also the smoke would have vanished. But I know the answer. It was summer. Fine. So what about cooking? It was after lunch. At this point the situation becomes pathetic, and to close once and for all this subject, I will add. In Finland, we have the tradition of sauna. We wash ourselves in or after taking a sauna, which we consume at any hour of the day. So, where is the smoke? On the screen you can appreciate a drawing belonging to the last decade of 1800, clearly proving that also in those times people were indeed taking a sauna. Where is the smoke? Maybe not many of the viewers have noticed where Finland is located in the world. Even in the middle of the summer, when the winds come from the north, temperature can drop several degrees in few hours. Therefore, even in the middle of the summer, we need to keep the fireplace on during the day. Where is the smoke? But I take the occasion to present you a very interesting piece of the puzzle related to the possibility of those series being staged, brought to our attention by the channel Conspiracy R Us. Let's listen.
Another palace, I thought, okay, let's take a look at the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. And for a long time, the only kind of heating at the Palace of Versailles were stoves, fireplaces, and small taganki. I don't know what that is. Okay, I had to translate this document from Russian to English, so a little could be lost in translation here. But okay, so for the European climate, luxurious fireplaces as sources of heat were quite suitable, but they could not heat the huge halls in severe St. Petersburg winters. During the frosty days in the halls of the Winter Palace, it was so cold that it served as an excuse for canceling court events. For example, on December the 27th, 1779, a ball was canceled in the Winter Palace on occasion of a great cold. So, St. Petersburg also appears to have issues with heat, especially obviously in the winter. And I'm not going to go too deep into all the issues and the different heating systems they had. I just want to briefly touch on the point that there were issues with people trying to stay warm at both palaces in the wintertime.
So what the channel Conspiracy Us was pointing out in his awesome video Climate Change 1700 Style is that the main buildings and palaces weren't designed for the winter. Not only in St. Petersburg, but everywhere in the northern countries. Even churches in Russia weren't constructed having some kind of heating system incorporated in them. What, they were not chilly in those times? How can it be that a city with a winter as St. Petersburg has issues with heating the palaces? Sounds pretty theater to me. But people were moving, the camera take time to shot the photographs, so humans were vanishing due to their movements. To start, why some were disappearing and others no? What, they were ugly? Why some crowds in earlier pictures are captured, but other crowds couldn't be photographed in later images? But better questions. Why in those pictures you can count only 2 or 3 trucks of trolley or cabs or buggies printed in the ground? Why there are no trolleys or cabs or buggies parked on the side of the road? Everybody moving. And what about horse shit? In the street, I mean, not the one written in our history books. In those times, people were using horses and donkeys to move around. Where is their shit? Moving. And what about garbage? We have all of these stories of the great stink and total lack of recuperation of trash, but in the pictures, everything perfectly clean. Actually, I will stop for a few seconds on this topic of the waste management in those times, because the channel Conspiracy at Us just came out with another very important piece of the puzzle. Let's listen.
There are these photos, right, from 1861, I believe, and the streets of St. Petersburg are completely empty. And what I kind of find interesting about this is, there's just some boats, but there's nobody. It's lifeless, right? And this has been talked about by other people as well. What I find interesting about this is it's not till after this that St. Petersburg experienced issues with waste management. So 1861, those photos, so it's not until later, 1890, that they have to start worrying about waste management. So it's just an interesting piece to that puzzle, because if they would have had to start dealing with waste management before these photos were taken, then this whole concept of empty cities, staged cities, you could have ruled this out. But this theory is still on the table for me. I think we did get reintroduced to these cities. And I know there's early pictures of London as well from like the early 1850s. So by the late 1850s in London, as more people, massive amounts of people are flooding the city, all of a sudden waste is an issue.
I personally think that the idea that a city the size of the one that we can appreciate on the screen does not have issues with waste management in 1860s, 70s, 80s, and all of a sudden it became a priority in 1890s, can lead us to the conclusion that the city was progressively repopulated or simply populated. I strongly encourage the viewer to watch the video about this obviously staged lack of sanitation system in old palaces and buildings that I posted in a playlist, and the link is in the description, to have more proof that there is something deeply wrong with those cities and wonderful structures. So let's go back to the horse shit. Where is it? The answer would be they cleaned the street for the purpose of taking the picture. The photographers in those times were, let's say, powerful people. They could empty entire cities to take their precious photographs. Therefore, they could ask to clean the garbage and shit from the street to make them more valuable. Let's take, for example, the center of St. Petersburg. Those buildings are occupied by very rich people, let's say the elite. Do you think that those guys would say to their personal cab or trolley to move away from the center because of a photograph? What if they would have an emergency? Do you think that those guys wouldn't go to the center because of a picture? And how would they manage to keep all of the other people out of it? And with this question I bring in more theories. It was Sunday and people were at church. All of those pictures, and it is always Sunday. Fine. So let's go back to the rich or the elite. How did they get to church? By walk? The mansions where the elite reside are located many kilometers away from the main churches. Where are the trolleys, cabs, horses, donkeys waiting for them outside the cathedral? Where is the horse shit? So people were inside, vanishing because of the camera. It was Sunday after lunch, and everybody just came out of the sauna and shot the fire not to make too much smoke and ruin the pictures. So what about the windows? Maybe not many of the viewers have noticed it that in Finland during the winter season we have almost 24-hour darkness. Night. You don't think that in summer people have the windows wide open to bring a bit of light inside the houses? So why are they all closed? Same with this one of Montreal. Everybody shy of the sun. Another question, what about the lack of boats? Look at Budapest. Go check what historians are telling us about the traffic of boats in the Duna River in those times. That's the second largest river of Europe, with several major cities along its course. But of course they were vanishing because of the delay of the camera to capture the images. So where are the trails of water that the boats leave behind? Because boats inside harbors are maneuvering very slow. Where are they? But let's move now to talk about something that is really important to mention. Let's pause the boats issue for a few seconds. We will bring it back in a moment. So, what about the mud in the streets? On the screen we can appreciate the two images of St. Petersburg and Toronto showing this strange, to me, clean-up process in the street of the center. I have received a very interesting theory. That's not mud being cleaned up, but the beginning of a stone paving or flooring. They are putting earth or clay on the streets to later place the stones that will become a rock or bricked road. Very good point. The only problem with this theory, by the way, on the screen we can observe a picture of Amsterdam that shows us the process of stone paving or flooring, to have an example of what we are talking about, is that as we can appreciate on the same panoramic photos, in the river there are no sign of boats bringing that earth or clay, but not even trolleys in the streets carrying piles of earth or clay, or the famous stone bricks that will be used for the paving or flooring. As I've showed you in one of my previous videos, there is no doubt that the construction material in St. Petersburg was carried by barges or boats. So, where are they? But I can tell you one thing, folks. I can't wait to start this documentary. Having lost completely trust in all of the educational institutions and with the need for answer about the various obvious questions that I will present you in this and the other videos that will be part of this staged reality episode, I feel obliged to create not only a classroom, but an entire school of expert researchers on those issues. Having no interest in any popularity or economical compensations, this project had the only purpose to search for answers and truth. Therefore, I would love to present other people's research and associate with more channels that will agree to let me proudly spread their studies. I'm calling for unity in this labyrinth of lies called reality. On the screen at this moment, you can appreciate a beautiful starport located in Finland. By the way, one of the many in those areas of Europe, precisely in the archipelago of islands in front of the town of Lovisa. It's called Svartholm. I have chosen to start from this place for one reason on top of the many, to give you proof that the so-called historians are parroting info in the various indoctrinational institutions without doing their own research and obvious observation. As we can clearly appreciate, the people who built the massive stone wall on the left side of the image are not at all the same that built the walls of the rest of the structure. Even a drunk donkey would easily realize that the types of stones used are different. The masonry is different. The size of the blocks is not even comparable. Just look at the size of this monstrous wall and look at the rest of the structure. No comment. So let's start with the official history behind its creation. On the screen you can contemplate an illustration, which is the foundation of the claiming of the historians to educate us about the date and blueprint of the construction of the starport. The first drawing is showing us a plan of the structure created, supposedly, in 1740 by Ernst Ward. Keep an eye on the bay that is visible on the left side of the image. The second drawing, which belongs to 1750, 10 years after the blueprint, yep, it's showing us the supposed starfort under construction. Actually, nope, because no construction site are depicted, but anyway, let's say half built. To me, it is very evident that it has been excavated, not built. Why? If we observe the center of the drawing, we can appreciate a large building, let's say a big house. It is located just in front of the upper right corner of the starfort. As you can clearly see, the building is higher than the corner wall of the structure. It is very evident that the wall of the starfort goes under that house. And if you look at the full illustration, you can observe that the signs of the structure being excavated and not built are all over. But let's move to the bottom drawing with clear date 1778. As you can clearly observe, the bay that was located on the left side of the illustration is now gone, or let's say was buried. So where is the earth or clay used to bury it coming from? Please don't tell me that they brought it to the island by boat. But after having the belly full of knowledge from that illustration, let's go examine the structure itself. Everything looks totally buried in mud or clay, and as we can see on this picture, there are ruins sticking out from the ground. We can also see that the oldest wall, the enormous one, presents visible sign of being buried by mud, and in our days overgrown by vegetation. The arches that are located all over the starfort are buried, and as we can observe, some of them have even been closed down. The structure clearly continues below ground level, and as we can see, also the top of the walls present sign of being covered by mud at some point. This image is really interesting because it's showing us the composition of the earth or clay, which is visibly some kind of mud. And just to prove that this is not a local situation, on the screen you can observe that other starforts located in the north of Europe. This one is Daugaspils in Latvia. Again, we can clearly contemplate its buried appearance. This one is the Taavetti starfort, located in the east of Finland. Same scenario, totally covered by mud. This one is a very interesting starfort, also located in the south of Finland. It is actually one of the largest starforts built on an island in Europe, and as we can appreciate, mud all over. By the way, I had the honor in my life to visit many starforts around the world, and even if their dates of construction were separated by gaps of few centuries, I couldn't really observe any major differences in erosion of the structure to support such extended period of time. And I would like to add that also the thickness of the mud or earth that covers them looks pretty much the same. But I will make an entire video about starfort in the next part of the episode Ancient Suomi, because I have a really interesting discovery to present you. So, let's continue. I'm not sure if I have already presented you this small question. Where is all of that mud or clay coming from? But what is really dimensional is that when I was there, I was shocked to see so much mud everywhere, in particular covering walls, arches, ruins, and the historians, they haven't noticed it. Why there are no mention of the structure being buried in so recent time? In fact, if we bring back the illustration of the supposed construction of the starport, we can learn a very good point. If the structure was completed in 1778, actually in 1788 from other sources, so the mud that covered it has appeared after that date. But I can connect more dots. At the beginning I've showed you that the actual starfort is built on top of something older, something much bigger. The proofs are in this enormous wall. Just look at the size of those blocks compared with a small tool house or whatever it is. No comments. But why I'm still talking about this place is because after understanding that it is built on top of a much stronger structure, I went to look in these northern European areas for similar walls. And do you remember the stone labyrinths that I presented you in one of my previous videos? Well, a large number of them are found in the Solovetsky Island archipelago of Russia, located in the Onega Bay of the White Sea. Well, the stone mazes are not the highlight of the archipelago, but this monastery. As we can contemplate in this really amazing structure, the lower part is composed of massive boulders, very similar in sizes, composition, and kind of tool marks to the Svartholm lower ones. So my first question was, are there any sign of mud or clay around the structure? Well, while researching these very intricate walk paths, just look at the perfection of the way that they fit together, I stumble upon these images. As we can clearly observe, some construction site is visible along its walls, and if we zoom into it, we can clearly see that the building continues under the current ground level. And in this other image, we can observe an opening on the ground. Are those blocks that form the side of the cavity built recently, or they are part of the base of the building that is buried beneath it? At this point, we are starting to collect proofs that at some point after the 1788, something happened to this area of the world that buried in mud or clay those structures. But is it only in this area? What could have caused the mud to appear? Historians have the answer. That's not mud, donkey. Those are cultural layers. Wow, please teach me more. A cultural layer is a natural process that refers to the presence of earth or clay that have formed due to the accumulation of dust, dirt, and other components during a long period of time. The thickness of the cultural layer can vary due to the deepness of the interested areas, the kind of soil, the environment that surrounds the location, and so on. Wow, so mystery solved. I can't wait to tell Sir Philippe that I found the answer. That's not mud flood, but cultural layers. Let's listen what our first research of the day think about this amazing discovery. Let me proudly present you Sir Philippe Truschini.
Okay, this is the example of what they call a cultural layer. I mean, we can see there's no cultural layer. We can see this is just a pile of different consistence like mud, clay, soil. And here's Omsk, my hometown where I was born. Some other examples of windows in the ground which are right now open due to the renovation of the building. I think there's no comments about this. Nobody would have done this on purpose. Probably it's just a mud slide which was performed by something, or most of the cities were located at the mining points, and that's how at some period of time the mine drill holes just getting damaged and the mud's coming out. Or maybe that's done on purpose, globally, worldwide, whatever you call it. It could have been done like this just to destroy the previous civilization and bury it in the ground. And again, as we can see, it's pretty deep in the ground. Here's the pictures of the same building were made in the beginning of 20th century. As we can see, the windows still in the ground. And here's another view of the same building, and probably pictured a little bit later. Okay. And we go into the famous picture that you've probably seen and were pretty amazed of. This is France, and that picture got me pretty astonished because I knew that France was also based on ruins, but not like this. And that's the market that we actually was located at this area. It was damaged or destroyed or demolished, if you want to call it demolition, and this is how it was performed. The huge construction was just blowing, and we could have seen the site of this construction, demolition, construction. This was aerial view of it. So it's a pretty huge object, pretty huge construction. But deep in the ground we can see just the same picture, mud and sand and clay. Probably no comments about it, but it's pretty interesting to call this a cultural layer. Just imagine how much volume of construction is underground worldwide. And this is not the only proof of this. As I was telling you, most of the Moscow, most of the St. Petersburg, and most of the Russian cities are just like this. There's no cultural layer, but they call it the cultural layer. Well, whatever you want to call it, it still looks for me as a mud. Huge volume of construction, and we're pretty much fooled by all those historicals and archaeological people. And this is again the Polytechnical Museum near Lubyanka, or the KGB building. The foundation of it reaches up to 18 meters deep in the ground. This is Kazan, also this famous street in the center of the city. Also, the basement reaches up to 10 meters. And we've seen this picture before, of course. And of course, we see many wooden houses all around Russia. And sometimes it's just wooden house, sometimes it's just a brick house and wooden second floor above it. And this is Abel in Syria, just another city that was excavated by archaeologists. And don't tell me it's a cultural layers. It's just amazing how people see and watch the thing and don't see anything. We call it in Russia watching and seeing nothing. Just the level of this archaeological excavation should have been turning those people to the right conclusions. But they didn't do the right conclusions, didn't make them, and got stuck in this historical concepts that they got. And again, wooden houses, which I was talking about, we have a bunch of them, and most of them get demolished from time to time because we need to construct more new ones, and huge apartment buildings being built over those evidence houses, whatever. Okay, and then just a couple of pictures of so-called cultural layers. We see this mud everywhere we go in Russia. Either it's a railroad construction or a house construction or a road construction. We see this, none of this cultural evidence that that's supposed to be left in this cultural layer. Just the pie of mud, soil, and sand. Oh, okay, and clay. And the level of this clay, mud, sand is sometimes pretty huge. Up to 20 meters, 30 meters, I think. And this is pretty amazing.
Okay, maybe are not cultural layers. What Philip pointed out is that throughout Russia, the old buildings of basically every city present sign of being buried by a thick layer of earth or mud. On the screen you can appreciate various examples of entire first floors buried in mud or clay. The deepness of it varies throughout Russia from a couple of meters to dozens. Now, before coming back to Europe, I would like to show you these images of Montreal. The signs of the old buildings being buried and therefore entire first floor being almost underground are everywhere. But the situation of Montreal is much more complex due to many floods recorded in the recent past that could have influenced the proof of the mud flood that we are researching, which we can at this point date in the first few decades of 1800. Another interesting proof was brought to our attention by the channel Conspiracy Harass in the first part of this video, with this old photograph of Sydney. As we can appreciate, also there looks like that another road was buried by a few meters of earth or mud. By the way, Zigidan have suggested that it could be made of granite cobbles. Very interesting. To give you more proof that it was a worldwide but strangely localized event, we could actually listen to our second researcher of the day. Let me proudly present you Conspiracy R Us.
This church. This is called, I believe it's St. Mary Magdalene Church. It's in Omaha, Nebraska. And in the 1920s, there was steep hills, apparently, in a certain portion of Omaha. And so they had a project where they wanted to level the streets and get rid of these hills. And since Omaha's earliest days, 6 steep hills, it vexed the residents. So city leaders knew that if the hills weren't conquered, there would be no development. Okay, so they began a series of projects to remove the hills. Over the years, some people sold their houses and businesses and moved to other parts of the city. Those unwilling to sell often found their properties condemned. So basically what they're saying is a lot of structures got destroyed, and this just happened to be one that survived the cut. But I've got some pictures of this I'd like to show you. Let's go back to here. So this is the current entrance, or was before the project, and they've made this ramp, and this goes up to here. So pay attention to this ground level. Let's go to the next slide. Here they're starting the project, and they're just getting rid of all this the earth, but you could see that this ramp going to the entrance is still here. And this is the shot that I really want us to focus on. Let's get in more. Let's get a tighter shot here. Alright, I hope you can see now. This is the ground level. Maybe I should zoom out a bit more. Okay, so here was that ground level slope that you saw. Here was the ramp they put in, and it led to these, to this set of stairs, or sorry, to that doorway. But see how far down this goes? I mean, what, 5, 10, 15, 20 feet. So this article, it doesn't really talk about, well, why was, like, what happened to cover this church? Like, what event actually did this? So I think this is a really good example, because you can see here was the ground level, and then you can see it. And so this building, this church, cathedral, it was around. It wasn't built in the dirt, in the mud, and then some of it happened.
As we are starting to comprehend, this, let's call it mud flood, was a worldwide event, but as I said earlier, strangely localized. The channel Conspiracy Aras in one of his videos was pointing out that some of the cities in North America that present sign of the mud flood were close to mountain chains or large hills. It is a very good observation, because could lead to the conclusion that the mud, however it was generated, was coming from the mountains, covering the city while flowing downhill. The problem is that it can't account for the areas that I'm researching. The south of Finland, Estonia, Latvia, do not present mountains or large hills in this geography. And I can say that either the area researched by Sir Philippe, which are not far from my location, show sign of the possibility of a mud flow flowing down from higher points, making this enigma more and more twisted. But wherever this mud came from, its flow must have been strangely slow, or not too strong to affect the stability of those buildings that otherwise would have obviously collapsed. But it's not the moment yet to take conclusion. Let's go back to Finland. As I already mentioned in one of my previous uploads, few years ago, while digging in the center of the town of Porvoo, which is one of the oldest of the country, workers had uncovered buried under a few meters of dirt or mud, an old wood road. As we can appreciate, the wood that composed the path is in very good condition and does not present any kind of process of rotting. And even if the kind of wood that composed the road is known to last for a long time, even underground, it can't remain in those almost perfect condition after 500 years. Therefore, whatever happened that covered that wood road is located very close in time. Very interesting are these two images courtesy of the New Earth channel. I'm not sure about the location in Russia of that buried wood road, but as we can observe, the condition of the wood and the thickness of the mud or clay match pretty well the Porvo one. And talking about old roads buried in mud, these street walls were dug out in the center of the beautiful town of Arona, Italy. What people, they were not sweeping the streets in those times. But it's not only roads. Let's go back to Russia and listen an amazing work of translation from Philip Druzhiny.
Somebody says that they just, excavated the roads, and this is what we see in the modern pictures, because they, dug the trench and they saw the ancient railroad, which they date to 1890s, but I doubt this date, because if it's buried like this, it's supposed to be like 1790s, something like this, right? So 17th century, maybe 18th century, according to the official science, that they say that 2 meters of depth gives us 200 years, right? So this is like 1.3, so it's like 130, so it's 1870. So why couldn't be 1860, 1850, 1840? So think about it. Because they give us 1 centimeter a year of the natural growing of the cultural layer. So if this is all cultural layer, so it could be, growing like in 130 years, right? So this railroad was not only abandoned completely, but it got on the thin layer of the mud. And this is impossible in the modern world, because when we have railways that are not used, they often get recycled. They often get used for some other purposes, even the private purposes, because people steal those railroads if they are abandoned. But this is not what we see on this picture of 1890s, also of the previous 19th century. And we see the people excavating the railroads. So probably what they did at that time, they were not building it, not building those highways, not building those railroads. They were just excavating. This is what they done. They excavated and restored the previous roads, the previous network. So this is what we see.
The full translation and video link is in the description. I can strongly recommend it. But I'm not going to add any comment, also because this topic of roads and railways will be touched in the next part of this video, because I have a good one to present you. Let's continue. This is another very interesting picture. The square under process of excavation is La Puerta del Sol, center of the beautiful city of Madrid. I couldn't find any article related to the buried structures, but again, we can see that some kind of earth or mud have covered whatever is under the today's street level. But let's go back to Porvo. The sign of the old buildings being buried at some point are just everywhere. I mean, it's insane. You have windows disappearing under the street level everywhere you look. And look at the size of this old door. Totally normal. But there is one building in particular that I would like to examine for a minute. On the screen at this moment, we can observe the City Hall of Porvo, located in the center of the town. To start, it was supposedly completed in 1893, and strangely enough, I cannot find photograph of its construction. I mean, I'm sure that being already the end of 1800, there are dozens of pictures of its inauguration and the completion, but I cannot find them. even if there are earlier images of the town, like the one on the screen belonging to 1880. I cannot find any signs of the construction of those buildings. Same with the Helsinki one. It was completed supposedly in 1852, but in the few images that you can find of the city from 1850, there are no sign of its construction. On the screen you have few examples of buildings and columns supposedly being under construction, but the reality is that what they are showing us is some kind of fixing, most probably, of structures that were already there. But this will be one of the topics of the next part of this video. So let's go back to our building in Porvo. Obviously present some issues with the ground level. I really don't think that it was designed that way. In winter, that entrance is completely under the snow. But what can become a good lesson for those who research this mud that at some point covered entire first floors of buildings and structures throughout the planet is that I know that not long time ago, one side of that building was lifted due to the presence of blue clay or green. But that clay, because of droughts and very wet season, became unstable, and some of the buildings actually have sank. It cannot account for all of the structures that I've showed you, but we have to keep an extra eye open on the kind of soil that is below the interested cities. Let's continue. This one is a very interesting building located in Helsinki, the capital of the country. Do you think that it was made to be that way? And in Helsinki, we have even the sign on the walls in early pictures, as I showed you in the first part of this video. The signs of mud are a bit everywhere. But listen to this one. The building on the screen is located in Viborg, nowadays Russia. But it will not be me commenting it, because this area of the world is starting to become popular among the researchers of this mud flood.
This is a good example right here. So this is an older building in Finland, and if you take a look at this side of the building, you can see there are 3 floors at least. So here we go, we have the same patterns, and if you look on the other side of the building, we've got the first floor, you have the second floor, and this whole 3rd floor is covered by earth. So I think this is good evidence that this building, it was built prior to whatever event happened, and then this cataclysm happened, and it covered, it's basically engulfed portions of this building. And I would speculate that this entrance here, the actual entrance to this building is probably a lot lower, but this is just another example how that they put an entrance to a higher level in the building. But I hope you could at least see that, and you're going to see this pattern happen a lot.
Now, let's just for a few seconds jump to the other side of the Gulf of Finland, in Tallinn, capital of the beautiful Estonia. As I already have mentioned in the previous video, the arches of the protective city wall are very low and they have been closed down. Proves that obviously that mud affected also this area. But look at this mansion, also located in Estonia. Do you think that it was designed that way? At this point, I think we are starting to have enough proof that something of catastrophic proportion has happened to this world around the beginning of 1800. But I know what historians at this point are obviously going to say. This guy is totally flipping out. If 200 years ago an event of such magnitude took place, we would have noticed it. There would be countless accounts of a mud wave striking the cities and the structure covering them with a thick layer of dirt or mud. But that's not the case. So this guy is retarded, and let's go back to the indoctrination. We were at the magical Roman Empire. No comments. At this point I will bring back one sentence. This mud flood was strangely localized. On the screen at this moment you can appreciate the area of the north of Norway, near the town of Alta. As I presented you in one of my previous videos, plenty of rock carvings were discovered. I'm not going to start with dates of creation or who made them, but the good point is that those areas do not present sign of being buried in mud. But as we can appreciate in these photos from the Kola Peninsula of Russia, the coastline presents huge amount of mud or earth. Same with this boat, also discovered buried in mud in Norway. Just look at the thickness of the earth or clay. So in some areas of the coast of Norway you can find meters and meters of mud, but in others no sign of it. I have hundreds of examples to give you about the strange behavior of the mud flood, but first I would say, let's try to understand what could be causing it.